When you open up a computer, one component connects everything together, the motherboard. It's the foundation of every system, allowing the CPU, memory, storage, and all other hardware components to communicate and function as a complete computer. Hi, I'm James, and I'll be taking you through today's lesson covering our free series about the CompTIA A+. Now in this video, we're starting Module A on motherboards, where we'll explore the structure, the features, and functions of one of the most important components in a PC. This topic is part of the CompTIA A+, developed by CompTIA, and it's essential knowledge for anyone preparing for a career in IT support or hardware troubleshooting. In this lesson, we will cover the purpose of the motherboard, key components found on the motherboard, common form factors, expansion slots and connectors, and how all parts of a computer system connect through it. Understanding the motherboard helps you see how a computer really works, not just as a separate parts, but as a complete system. The motherboard, also referred to as the main board or system board, contains the electronic circuitry and connectors for a computer's critical components. All computer devices communicate through the motherboard circuitry. Components can be installed directly onto the motherboard, connected to a port built directly onto the board, or connected through an expansion card via an expansion slot on the motherboard. Many components are directly on the motherboard. Some of these items are replaceable, such as the CPU and CMOS battery. Others are soldered in place, and if they break, you must replace the entire motherboard. Examples of a non-replaceable component include a RAM slot and drive connectors. The Central Processing Unit, or CPU, is a silicon microchip that processes all instructions, whether entered through a user input or submitted by a computer program. All CPUs must be kept cool, as they generate heat when processing instructions. The CMOS battery is a small battery, typically a lithium coin cell that provides continuous power to the computer's real-time clock and maintains system BIOS and UEFI settings. Now, CMOS batteries can last from 2 to 10 years before you need to replace them. A failing CMOS battery will cause incorrect system date or loss of BIOS UEFI settings when the computer is powered off. RAM slots hold memory chips for the computer. Most computers have between 2 and 4 slots, but servers and high-end workstations might have more. Slots in colored pairs usually indicate dual-channel memory, which means they should be installed in pairs. The chipset is a set of integrated circuits that routes communication between the computer components and the CPU. This chipset uses two main chips. The Northbridge chip connects directly to the CPU via the front-side bus. It also directly connects to the computer's RAM and the graphics processing unit. So these components communicate directly with the CPU. Now the Southbridge chip manages input and output interfaces of the computer, such as the PCI, USB, serial, and IDE. The Southbridge chip communicates with the CPU through the Northbridge chip, which makes it a slower interface. To reduce cost and improve performance, newer motherboards incorporate many Northbridge chip functions into the CPU itself. Serial ATA drive connectors connect modern hard disk drives, solid states, and optical drives to the motherboard circuitry. One benefit of the SATA standard is hot plugging, which allows you to install a SATA drive without shutting down the system. Integrated drive electronics or IDE drive connectors connect hard disk drives and optical drives to the motherboard circuitry. Two IDE drives share one data cable. When you install both, one must be set to primary and the other to secondary. This interface has largely been replaced by SATA in modern systems. The ATX power connector is a 24-pin connector that allows the power supply to provide power to the motherboard via the power supply cabling. This connector supplies 3 separate voltage levels, 3.3, 5 and 12 volts. Older ATX boards might have a 20-pin connector, and very old computers with 80 or LPX format might have 2 6-pin connectors. The ATX 12-volt power connector connects the 12-volt 4-pin power cable from the power supply unit to provide the CPU with additional power. High-end and server motherboards might require an 8-pin EPS 12-volt power connector. A fan connector is a 3 or a 4-pin connector used for a CPU or case cooling fan. The 3 common pins are electrical ground, power and a sense output pin that signals fan speed. If a 4th pin, called the control pin, is included, it is used to adjust the fan rotation speed without adjusting the voltage. The front panel connector, also referred to as the front or system panel connector, contains sockets for plug-in 5 system cables. Now, these include the power button, reset button, power LED, hard disk activity LED, and internal speaker used for beeps and other simple network sounds. Internal USB headers allows you to connect USB ports on your case to the motherboard. They are double rows of pins on the motherboard, which may or not be surrounded by a plastic slot. USB headers can look similar to connectors used by the front panel or other case-based ports, so make sure to examine the motherboard documentation before connecting them if you're not certain what a given connector is. Many computers include ports that are built into the motherboard for common input and output devices. Even most smartphones and tablets include a 3.5mm port for connecting headphones. Now, on a PC, you most often access these ports on the rear of the computer case. On a laptop or a mobile device, these ports are often accessed on the side of the case. Universal Serial Bus or USB connects the computer and a variety of computer peripherals such as keyboard, digital cameras, printers, external disk drives, and more. One of the benefits of USB interface is that it can supply power to the peripheral device. Now, a tablet or smartphone will have a micro USB connection. Apple devices may have a Thunderbolt port, although this proprietary high-speed connection is being phased out. Now, the PS2 connector, a legacy 6-pin interface, connects older keyboards and pointing devices to the computer. Older computers will have a purple port for the keyboard and a green port for the mouse or other pointing device, or 2 ports without clear color coding. Most current PC motherboards just have a single port where you can connect a keyboard or a mouse. USB input devices have largely replaced the PS2 devices. HDMI or High Definition Multimedia Interface digitally transfers high-definition video and audio from your computer to a display device. HDMI is popular for newer monitors and televisions. Portable devices such as laptops and tablets might have a micro HDMI port. VGA or Video Graphics Array connects an older display device to your computer via a 15-pin connector and uses an analog signal. VGA is phased out by now, however it may still be seen in legacy devices. DVI or Digital Visual Interface connects a display device to your computer. The 3 types of DVI-D, which is digital only, DVI-A, which is analog only, and DVI-I, which supports both digital and analog. DVI does not provide as high a video resolution as HDMI, but is higher than VGA. In addition, DVI does not support audio like HDMI does. The local area network or LAN connector. Now, this is a RJ45 Ethernet port used to attach a computer to a local computer network via a physical cable. 3.5mm connectors are used to connect audio devices to your computer. Pink is audio in for connecting a microphone. Lime green is audio out for connecting headphones or front speakers. The light blue is analog line in for connecting other devices such as a turntable or a receiver. Other colored sound ports not shown might include grey for your rear channel, black for side, left and right channels, and orange for center bass channel for surround sound capabilities. Some motherboards might have connectors not found on a typical one, such as a newer USB Type-C ports used by some newer USB devices, or external SATA connectors used by external hard drives, solid-state drives and optical drives. External SATA or eSATA is the external SATA interface, which allows you to connect external SATA hard drives, solid-state drives and optical drives to your computer. An expansion slot is a hardware interface that enables communication between your PC and expansion cards, including sound cards, network cards, and other connectors such as USB, FireWire, or SATA. The expansion slot is also supported by a bundle of electronic circuitry on the motherboard called a bus. The bus provides electrical power, control signal, memory addresses, and data pathways, also called data lines. The speed of a bus is measured in megahertz, which indicates how fast information can travel over the data lines. The faster the bus, the more information it can move simultaneously. There are several types you need to be familiar with. PCI, used by older expansion cards. PCIe, used by most new expansion cards. Mini PCI and Mini PCIe, used primarily for internal expansion of laptops and compact PCs. Express card, used to expand laptop devices via an external slot. And M.2, used for storage and network devices. Motherboards designed for compact cases might have a proprietary slot for a riser card in the place of some or all expansion slots. The riser card has its own expansion slot, which you can use to attach standard peripherals. Legacy systems might use a variety of other expansion cards such as AGP, PCIX, ISA or eISA. You will not see any of these on a new computer. The original PCI bus had a 32-bit parallel data path and a maximum speed of 33 megahertz. It operated at 133 megabytes per second and supplied 5 volts of power to the expansion card. A 64-bit version operated at the same 33 megahertz speed, transferring 266 megabytes per second. PCI 2.x versions were also 32 or 64-bit, operating at speeds of 132, 264, 528 megabytes per second. The 32-bit version supplied either 5 or 3.3 volts of power to the expansion card, while the 64-bit version supplied only 3.3 volts. PCI slots are designed to match notches in the PCI card so that you don't insert a card in the wrong slot, thus delivering too little or too much power to the card. Peripheral Component Interconnect or PCI is a standard length and is used for input and output devices. PCI Express or PCIe slots come in various lengths and are used for high-speed modern devices. PCI-X or Peripheral Component Interconnected Extended is an evolution of the original PCI bus, which you might find in high-end legacy computers. It should not be confused with a similarly sounding PCIe bus used on newer computers. PCI-X slots are usually longer 64-bit slots and can operate at a higher speed than PCI. PCIe slots size indicate how many data lines are available. For example, PCIe times 1 has a single data channel. Now there are 4 wires that make up the line. One pair sends data and the other pair receives it. The sizes currently are 1 times, 4 times, 8 and 16 times, with the 16 times being the fastest. The bandwidth is dependent both on the size of the slot and what version the PCIe is being used. The speeds shown are pre-direction speeds. If you want to know the aggregate for both directions, double those number. PCIe 16 times is commonly used for graphics cards, while one-time slots is used for low bandwidth devices like sound or network interface cards. PCIe slots differ only in their physical length and the number of available lanes. You can plug a PCIe 1 times card into a PCIe 4 times or larger slot, but not vice versa, even if the restriction is only due to the physical form factor. On a board with multiple 16 times slots, some may operate electrically at 8 times or lower. A 16 times card will still work, but will operate at the same mode as the slot. PCIe buses use 32 or 64-bit data connection despite the serial physical format. So from the viewpoint of the operating system, they're very similar to PCI. However, even the slowest PCIe connection is at least as fast as a PCI bus. All PCI slots are connected through a single PCI bus to the I/O controller, also known as the south bridge on the motherboard. Each PCIe slot is connected to the I/O controller, south bridge on the motherboard through its own dedicated link. PCIe slots for video cards are connected to the memory controller, also known as the north bridge. Now, for example, the CPU core connects through the front side bus to the memory controller hub, also known as the north bridge. The north bridge connects directly to RAM. A PCIe 4.0 16-time graphics slot connects to the north bridge and can transfer up to 32 gigabytes per second. PCI Express 4 one-time slot connects to the I/O controller hub, also known as the south bridge. These provide lower bandwidth, such as 2 gigabytes per second. Now, traditional 33 MHz PCI slots share a maximum bandwidth of 132 megabytes per second. Now, USB 3.1 connects through the south bridge at approximately 1,250 megabytes per second. Mini PCI and Mini PCI Express slots are significantly smaller than standard PCI and PCI Express slots. However, they are electrically equivalent connectors with the same respective pin count and feature. They were designed for use on laptop motherboards. Mini PCI cards are 56.5 by 50.95 millimeters, and half-height Mini PCI cards are 30.2 by 36.8 millimeters. While some desktops have a Mini PCI or a Mini PCI Express slot, you will most often find them being used to add an internal card, such as a wireless networking card, to a laptop. On older motherboards, you might see a accelerated graphics port, or AGP. Now, AGP was based on a 64-bit PCI bus, but provided dedicated connection and features meant for video cards. You probably won't see an AGP card on a motherboard with PCI Express ports, but a single brown port next to a row of PCI slots, now that's AGP. The Express card standard was developed to replace PC card, also known as PCMCIA, and is typically used in laptop computers. It has two form factors. Now, the Express card 34, which is 34 millimeters wide with a 34 millimeters connector. An Express card 54, which is 54 millimeters wide, but designed in an L shape with the same 34 millimeter connector. A 54 millimeter slot accepts both 34 and 54 millimeter cards, while a 34 millimeter slot accepts only 34 millimeter cards. Express card slots are often covered by a protective cover or plastic cover. Express cards is a serial port capable of the following speeds. This is a 200 80 megabits per second in USB 2 mode, 1.6 gigabytes per second in PCI Express 1 mode, and 3.2 gigabytes per second in PCIe 2 or USB 3 mode. Now, ExpressCard 2.0 is capable of speeds up to 5 gigabits per second in PCIe 2.0 or USB 3.0 super speed mode. All ExpressCard versions allow hot plugging of devices. Just like USB expansion, Express cards can be used to provide additional connection ports for a computer, such as Ethernet, eSATA, USB, or even PCI Express. They can also provide specific functionality such as mobile broadband, Wi-Fi, sound, or even a TV tuner. M.2, also called the Next Generation Form Factor, or NGFF, is used for internally mounted computer expansion cards and associated connectors. M.2 replaces the M-SATA standard, which uses the PCI Express mini physical card layout and connectors. M.2 is more flexible and allows different module width and length. M.2 also has more advanced interfacing features than M-SATA for solid-state storage, particularly in smaller devices such as tablets and ultrabooks. The M.2 connector provides the following computer bus interface. So you've got the PCI Express 4.0 up to 4 lanes, SATA 3.0 a single logical port, and USB 3.0 a single logical port. When using the PCI instead of the SATA bus, M.2 devices can transfer data anywhere from 50% to approximately 650% faster than standard SATA. It is up to the manufacturer of the M.2 host connector or module to select which interface to be supported. Now, the flexibility of the M.2 format means that when inserting an M.2 module into an host connector, it isn't as simple as just plugging in a card. M.2 cards come with two major compatibility variables, length and key. When using an M.2 module, your computer needs to have enough physical space to support the card length. Now, you generally want the card to be the size intended for use by your motherboard manufacturer as an indication on the circuit board and allows for small screw to securely hold it in place. All M.2 devices have the same width of 22 millimeters, so the only variable is length. Now, the size of the M.2 module is expressed in the format M.2 2230. Now, the first numbers is the width, the 22 millimeters, and the second number indicates the length. Now, in this example, 30 millimeters. Some motherboards are flexible, providing mounting holes for retention screws at some or all of the 3 intervals, while the M.2 standard uses the same 22 millimeter wide slot for all cards. It is not necessarily the exact same slot. Because M.2 is designed to be used with so many kinds of devices, it has some frustratingly similar looking ports. Now, the B key uses a gap in the card left side, which correspond to the host controller's left side with 6 pins to the gap's left. This configuration supports PCI Express 2x bus connection. They can also be used for SATA drives. The M key uses a gap on the card's right side, which correspond to the host controller's right side with 5 pins to the gap's right. This configuration supports PCI Express x4 bus connection with twice the data throughput. Now, the B plus M key uses both of the above gaps with 5 pins on the card's right and 6 on the card's left. Because of the physical design, B plus M key cards are limited to PCI Express x2 or SATA. M.2 cards with a B key interface can only fit in a B key host slot, and likewise for M keys. But cards with a B plus M key design can fit in either a B or a M host slot because they have both gaps. Because the 2 key standards can easily be confused, check your laptop or your motherboard specification to see which one is supported. A motherboard's form factor specifies its dimensions, component layout, power supply type, mounting hole location and other information such as the number of ports installed on the motherboard. Smaller form factors allow more compact computers, while they can typically fit newer components and make assembly harder. In particular, small boards usually have fewer RAM or expansion slots. ATX is a full-size desktop motherboard measuring 12 inches by 9.6 inches. XL-ATX is an extended length motherboard measuring 12 inches by 13 inches. It accommodates 4 graphics cards with dual slot cooling, more RAM and a second CPU. Mini ATX is a slightly smaller ATX board measuring 11.2 inches by 8.2 inches. Micro ATX is a still more compact ATX board measuring 9.6 inches square or smaller. Flex ATX is derived from Micro ATX and measured 9 inches by 7.5. Mini ITX measures 6.7 inches square and has a single expansion slot. Nano ITX measures 4.7 inches square and is intended for small or low power applications. It only supports mini PCI Express and laptop RAM slots. There are no standard laptop motherboard form factor. They are customized by each manufacturer to fit their unique case design. Now, while selecting a motherboard, the motherboard's form factor must be compatible with the computer's case size. Case sizes are less standardized than motherboard form factors, so you should check the exact dimensions and expansion space for a specific case. Now, a full tower is a PC designed to sit on the floor with an 8 or 22 inch or more. Full towers can hold full ATX or smaller boards, and some will fit the ATX XL. More importantly, a full tower case has a lot of space for drives, large video cards and other internal components. A full tower case might have from 6 to 16 drive bays. They can be a mix of internal or external, and due to the declining popularity of optical drives, newer cases may have few or no external drive bays, devoting the space to cooling systems. A mid-tower is the most widely used form factor, with a height between 18 and 22 inches. Mid-tower cases typically support ATX boards but have less internal space than a full tower. Typical mid-tower contains 2 to 6 internal drive bays with up to 4 external bays. Mini tower desktop PCs has a height of 12 to 18 inches and is typically designed to hold micro ATX or smaller boards. Mini towers usually have 2 or 3 internal drive bays and at most 1 or 2 externals. They may also not be able to fit some large expansion cards. A slimline case is a desktop computer that is designed to lay horizontally instead of vertical. The horizontal surface of a slimline computer will hold a display monitor. Slimline computers will often use a micro ATX, mini ITX motherboards. Some use a custom motherboard that install expansion cards via riser card, while others use a low-rise PCI or PCI Express cards. A small form factor desktop computer is designed to be compact and minimize the occupied space. They come in a variety of shapes and sizes, including shoebox, cube, book size. The mini ITX motherboards is most often used in small form factor computers. Because notebook computers are almost never assembled by end users from parts, they don't have the same standardized form factor as desktops. You're more likely to see a notebook described by its screen size, measured diagonally, such as 15 inches, or by other aspects of its physical configuration. A laptop or a notebook is a full-powered portable computer with an attached keyboard and a clamshell lid. Screen sizes typically range from 13 to 17 inches and may have computing power comparable to that of a desktop. may also be used as a generic term for all mobile computers with a clamshell form factor regardless of size. A sub-notebook is a smaller notebook with a screen size of 12 inches or smaller. They may also be called ultra-portables, netbooks, or any other branding terms. Sub-notebooks are typically less powerful, more expensive than laptops, but some have longer battery lives. A tablet is a mobile computer without an attached keyboard, which relies on a touch screen or external keyboard for input. Tablets typically have screen sizes between 7 and 10 inches, and many run mobile operating systems first designed for smartphones. A 2-in-1 is a laptop or sub-notebook with a keyboard portion that either detaches or folds all the way around so the device can be used as a tablet. May also be called a convertible tablet or laptop. Now, a phablet is a small tablet or large smartphone with a screen size between 5 inches and 7 inches. Diagnosing motherboard issues is challenging. Common problems with motherboard components or connections manifest as systems instability or failure to start. Now, these issues can be caused by other problems such as the CPU, RAM, power supply, or video. Error beeps on boot are diagnostic codes emitted by the motherboard speaker or built-in buzzer to indicate specific hardware issues. Now, these beeps vary depending on the motherboard manufacturer, so it's important to refer to the specific motherboard documentation for the exact meaning of each beep code. Common beep codes include one short beep means the system has passed the post and is booting properly. Continuous beeps usually indicate the RAM is not installed properly or is defective. 3 short beeps mean the system cannot detect the keyboard during boot. 1 long beep and 1 short beep means the CPU cannot be detected. 3 long beeps mean the video card cannot be detected. Long continuous beeps without breaks often indicate a motherboard issue. Keep in mind that these were only examples. Always refer to the motherboard manual or manufacturer website for the exact error beep code that apply to your hardware, as different brands can have different meanings for the same beep pattern. It's usually best to use beep codes as a diagnostic first step, especially when the system fails to post or display anything on the screen. Remember, the post process only checks the RAM, the keyboard, the CPU, the video card, and the motherboard. When diagnosing hardware issues like motherboard problems, different operating systems may display crash screens or other messages to alert users to the issue. These screens typically indicate that the system has experienced a critical error, often related to a hardware failure or improper configuration. Each operating system handles these errors differently, and motherboard-related problems can lead to unique crash screens or messages. While Windows, Linux, and Mac OS display different crash screens, they all serve the same purpose: to protect the system from further damage by halting the operation when a critical error is encountered. If motherboard components such as the CPU, memory controller, or storage connecting are failing, these systems will display error messages or crash screens that often contain specific error codes to help with troubleshooting. Or in each case, it's crucial to follow a structured troubleshooting approach to identify whether the root cause is indeed motherboard failure, or if other components such as memory or storage devices are to blame. Regular hardware diagnostic, component checks, and testing tools can assist in diagnosing and resolving underlying issues. The blue screen of death, or a BSOD, is a well-known Windows crash screen that appears when the system encounters a critical error. While BSODs can result from various hardware failures, including faulty RAM, graphics cards, or motherboard issues, certain motherboard-specific problems, such as issues with a chipset or integrated peripherals, can also trigger the screen. Now, common errors codes associated with motherboard issues might include an error ending with a 9C, machine check exception, often caused by CPU or motherboard issues. Error ending with 7E. Now, system thread exception not handled, now sometimes related to faulty hardware such as the motherboard, and an error ending with 50, page fault in a non-paged area, which can also be linked to memory or a motherboard fault. Motherboard-related BSODs usually occur when the system cannot properly communicate with key components like the processor, memory or storage devices. In these cases, you might see messages indicating hardware errors or failures like system service exception or machine check exception, which could point to a motherboard failure. Now, if you see a BSOD repeatedly, first check hardware connections like RAM, CPU or GPU seating. Run hardware diagnostics to check for motherboard issues and ensure that all drivers, BIOS and UEFI are updated. Now, Microsoft is shifting from the traditional blue screen of death to a redesigned black screen of death in Windows 11. Now, functionally, it's the same crash screen, but with a clearer, darker or cleaner, darker look and a streamlined information, including extras like a QR code. In Linux, a kernel panic is the equivalent of a blue screen of death. It occurs when the system's kernel, the core or the operating system encounter a serious error and is unable to recover. Now, kernel panic message typically appears as a black screen with white text showing a detailed error message and a stack trace. Message can vary but often include a kernel panic not syncing. Now, this indicates that the operating system cannot safely shut down or recover from a critical issue, possibly linked to a motherboard hardware failure, such as a defective CPU or memory controller. Unable to mount root file system. Now, this can sometimes be caused by motherboard failure affecting storage devices or memory access. Now, kernel panic caused by a motherboard issue might indicate that the system is unable to communicate properly with essential hardware components, such as the RAM, the CPU, or disk controllers. Specific hardware components failing, such as memory slots on the motherboard, or the CPU failing to interact with the system, can also trigger a panic. If you experience a kernel panic, check your hardware connection, including RAM, storage, and CPU. If you can also boot into a live USB or rescue mode to perform diagnostics or try running memory tests such as memtest 86. Similar to Linux, when Mac OS experiences a problem that it cannot recover from, such as a hardware failure, it will display a kernel panic. Now, the screen displays a message in multiple languages stating that you need to restart your computer along with a reset button. The background is usually gray or a black screen. The crash log often include details such as a panic CPU or caller code and a trace that shows where the error occurred. Sometimes it mentions components like memory or storage as the cause. Now, in macOS kernel panics caused by motherboard issues are usually tied to components like the RAM, the CPU, or the logic board, which is actually the motherboard for a Mac. Now, issues like overheating, bad memory, or failure of the system's onboard storage controller could all trigger a panic. macOS is designed to protect the system from potential damage, and a kernel panic is the macOS's way of shutting down the system to avoid corruption. When faced with a kernel panic, ensure all peripheral devices are properly connected and functioning. If the panic continues, resetting the NVRAM or the PRAM or system management controller can sometimes help resolve the issue. For persistent problems, running Apple diagnostics or hardware tests can help identify motherboard-related issues. Motherboard overheating is also a common issue that can lead to system instability, crashes, or even long-term damage to components. Overheating can occur due to a variety of reasons, and identifying the root cause is essential for resolving the issue. One common cause is insufficient airflow inside the case. Now this could be due to a buildup of dust or improper fan placement, obstructing the flow of air needed to cool the motherboard or other components. Additionally, poor thermal paste application or a malfunctioning CPU cooler can result in inefficient heat transfer from the CPU to the cooling system, causing the motherboard to overheat. Other potential causes of overheating include a faulty or inadequate case fan, improper ventilation due to a cramped system setup, or overclocking, which can generate excessive heat. In some cases, the motherboard's built-in temperature sensor might not be functioning correctly, giving inaccurate readings and masking the overheating problem. Now, furthermore, the power supply unit might be malfunctioning, providing too much or too little power to the motherboard, also leading to a thermal stress. Now, to resolve overheating issues, start by ensuring the case has proper ventilation and airflow. Check for dust buildup on fans, heat sinks, motherboard, and clean them as needed. If airflow is restricted, consider adding or repositioning case fans for better circulation. Verify that CPU cooling is functioning properly and reapply thermal paste if necessary. If overclocking is enabled, revert to the default setting may help reduce heat generation. Now, additionally, replacing a faulty or underpowered power supply unit can stabilize power delivery and prevent thermal stress. Now, finally, monitoring system temperature with software tools and ensuring that the motherboard's temperature sensors are functioning correctly can help pinpoint overheating issues and prevent long-term damage. Regularly checking the system's thermal performance is crucial in maintaining optimal operating conditions and extending the life of motherboard components. Now, if overheating is an issue, you may experience some of the following problems. A burning smell. Now, a burning smell coming from a computer is a serious issue that can indicate a range of problems. It's typically a sign that something inside the system is overheating or experiencing electrical failure. Now, when experiencing this issue, an A+ technician should immediately shut off the computer to prevent further damage. Inspect the power supply unit, the motherboard, the CPU, the GPU for visible signs of damage, such as the scorch marks or melted components. Clean the computer to remove dust and debris, ensuring all fans and heat sinks are working properly. Check the cables for wear or damage and replace them as needed. Test the system after cleaning and repairing any damaged components to ensure the burning smell does not persist. Now, if the CPU or GPU gets too hot due to insufficient cooling or a failed heatsink or fan, it can burn out the components, creating a burning smell. The smell may come from burnt thermal paste, the component themselves, or even nearby wires. A power supply unit can overheat if it is malfunctioning, clogged with dust, or undersized for the system's power needs. The electrical components inside the PSU can begin to burn out, emitting a distinct burnt odor. Now, a short circuit or a malfunctioning component, such as a capacitor, can lead to overheating and a burning smell. This could happen from improper installation, a power surge, or damage to a component. Now, over time, wires, especially power cables, can become worn, frayed, or overheated. Now, the insulation around the wires can melt, causing a burning smell. It's crucial to check cables for visible damage. When electronic components like capacitors or resistors on the motherboard or the graphics card fail, they can burn out, releasing an acrid odor. This is especially common in older systems and those that have been exposed to electrical surges. If a fan motor is malfunctioning and is not spinning correctly, it may overheat and emit a burning smell from the motor itself. Now, dust buildup on components, especially near heatsinks and fans, can cause overheating. The dust can also burn when it comes in contact with hot components, creating a burning smell. Now, this often helps in systems that haven't been cleaned in a while. Now, random shutdowns of a computer can be frustrating and often indicate underlying hardware or a software issue. Now, the hardest part is identifying the underlying root cause. So that is an issue we will go in now. Now, when experiencing this issue, a technician should clean the system to remove dust and ensure proper airflow. Check temperatures using the monitoring software to identify overheating components. Inspect the power supply for signs of failure or insufficient power output and replace it if necessary. Test the RAM using diagnostic tools to ensure it's functioning properly. Update drivers, the operating system files, and run system integrity checks to repair corrupted files. Check for malware by running a full system scan with up-to-date antivirus software. Check for loose cables. Replace any damaged or frayed internal wires. Revert overclocking settings to the default and test for stability. Now, a failing or inadequate power supply unit is one of the most common causes of random shutdowns. Now, if the PSU is not providing consistent or enough power to the motherboard, the CPU or other components, it can cause the system to shut down unexpectedly. Now, this could be due to age, electrical surges, or just a poor quality PSU. Defective or improperly seated RAM can cause system instability and lead to random shutdowns. In some cases, RAM issues may cause crashes, blue screens, or shutdowns. Problems with the motherboard, such as short circuits, damaged circuits, or faulty capacitors, can lead to unexpected shutdowns. If components like the CPU or GPU are overclocked beyond their safe operating limit, they may become unstable and cause a random shutdown. Overclocking generates additional heat, which can also contribute to overheating. If the operating system has corrupted files or configurations, it can cause instability and also lead to random shutdowns. Now, this could be a result of failed software update, malware, or an improper shutdown. Incompatible or outdated drivers can cause instability, leading to crashes and unexpected shutdowns, especially when a driver is unable to communicate properly with a hardware component. Certain power settings, such as aggressive power saving configurations, may cause the computer to shut down unexpectedly. Malware or viruses may also interfere with system processing, leading to crashes. Now, electrical fluctuations such as power surges or outages can lead to unexpected shutdowns. These may be caused by faulty wiring, electrical storms, or issues with the power grid. A loose connection between the power cable and the PSU or between the PSU and the motherboard can cause intermittent power loss, resulting in random shutdowns. Worn or frayed cables, especially those connected to circuit or critical components like the hard drive or the motherboard, can lead to a loss of power or communication and cause the system to shut down unexpectedly. Now, for motherboard or mobile devices, a failing or miscalibrated battery can cause the system to shut down randomly even when plugged in. Now, if the battery is not holding a charge or has a faulty connection, it may cause the device to lose power unexpectedly. If the battery overheats due to charging issues or poor ventilation, the system might shut down as a protective measure. Now, application crashes can be caused by the motherboard or CPU issues, although it's not most common reason for crashes. Now, when these hardware components fail or exhibit instability, they can disrupt the normal functioning of the system, including causing application crashes. Now, troubleshoot other common application crash root causes prior to focusing on the motherboard and CPU. However, if all other causes are ruled out, many of the previous root causes discussed can be involved. Now, a damaged or failing motherboard, such as a faulty capacitor or a damaged circuit, can disrupt communication between components, leading to an application crash. If the motherboard has issues with the RAM slots or power delivery to certain components, the application may not receive the resources it needs, causing a crash. If the motherboard cannot properly regulate power, it can send irregular, fluctuating power to the CPU and components, leading to instability. Additionally, poor cooling on the motherboard can cause overheating of essential components, which may trigger application crashes. Problems with the motherboard chipset, BIOS or the UEFI firmware can cause compatibility or communication issues between the CPU, the RAM, and storage devices. Now, this can lead to application crashes or system instability. If the motherboard has a short circuit or physical damage, it can cause sudden shutdowns, crashes, or erratic behavior in applications as the motherboard fails to communicate properly with other components. Now, if an A+ technician suspects the motherboard is causing application crashes, monitor the temperature to ensure the CPU, the motherboard are not overheating. Use diagnostic tools to check the CPU temperature, airflow in the case. Check for any visible damage on the motherboard, such as a burnt component or a damaged capacitor, and replace the motherboard if needed. Run a memory and stress test to check the stability of the system, particularly if you suspect the motherboard or CPU might be malfunctioning. Check power supply stability. Consider replacing the power supply if it's unstable or undersized for the system's needs. Update the BIOS or UEFI firmware on the motherboard to ensure the system is running with the latest compatibility fixes and performance improvements. Now, capacitor failure on a motherboard is a relatively common issue, particularly in older systems and those that have been subjected to heat, voltage fluctuation, and age. Capacitors are critical components on the motherboard that store and release electrical energy to smooth out voltage and power delivery to sensitive areas like the CPU, memory, and other components. Now, over time, capacitors can degrade, leading to symptoms such as random shutdowns, system instability, or even failure to boot. One of the most obvious signs of capacitor failure is the physical bulging or leaking of the capacitor, which can be spotted visually on the motherboard. The cause of capacitor failure are varied. Excessive heat is one of the primary culprits, as it can cause the electrolytic fluid inside the capacitor to evaporate, leading to internal pressure buildup that cause them to bulge or leak. A poor quality capacitor, often used in cheaper motherboards, are also more likely to fail prematurely. Additionally, unstable power delivery, power surges, or an insufficient power supply can lead to overworking of capacitors, causing them to fail. And then finally, electrostatic discharge during installation or maintenance can damage capacitors and other components on the motherboard. Now, while replacing the capacitor is an option, removing and resoldering new capacitors can be time-consuming and requires skills often held by an A+ technician. The most common and cost-effective solution is simply to replace the motherboard. Now, to prevent capacitor failure in the future, improving the cooling in the case, using a high-quality components, and ensuring that the power supply is stable and sufficient for the system's power requirements can reduce the risk of damage. Regular maintenance, such as cleaning dust from components, ensuring proper airflow, can also extend the lifespan of capacitors and other motherboard components. When components such as the CPU or the GPU are overclocked, they may run at a higher voltage and thus generate more heat. If the cooling system is inadequate, this leads to overheating and eventually a burning smell as the components begin to fail. If components are improperly installed, such as incorrect seating or the CPU cooler or improper thermal paste application, it can cause overheating, leading to damage and a burnt odor. Now, when you try to troubleshoot a problem that might involve motherboard problems, try the following approaches. If the computer emits a consistent pattern of error beeps on boot, consult the motherboard manufacturer error codes. You can also purchase an inexpensive motherboard tester or PC analyzer card, which plugs into the or into most motherboards and provide a visual error code. Some high-end boards include onboard analyzers, examine the motherboard itself for signs of damage, such as broken or missing components, or circuitry that looks burnt or blackened. Check all connections on the motherboard, including the power, peripheral cables, RAM, and expansion cards. Check the motherboard's connections to the case. The board should be firmly screwed into each mounting point, but not directly contacting the metal of the case elsewhere. To eliminate problems from other components, disconnect cables and devices not needed for the core system operation, such as expansion cards and drives not needed for the boot process. Some components and devices use visual or remote indications of a problem. Now, visual indicators often include LED or light emitting diode lights and liquid crystal displays or LCDs. Now, LED lights and components might turn off if the device is no longer functioning or blink when it encounters an issue. Device indicators on LCD panels can have numerous lights that display different colors such as green, amber or red. The color blink rate for each light indicates hardware equipment status. You often see LED lights for the following types of hardware. Server boot process and normal operating state indicators help you identify boot issues or servers that are not in a normal operating state. Locate indicators help you find a server within a rack of servers. Over a temperature condition, errors indicate when a server or component reaches a critical temperature. PSU failure indicates the power supply has failed or is failing. Memory failure indicates a RAM module has failed or is failing. CPU failure indicates the CPU has failed or is failing. Fan module failures indicate a fan has failed or is failing. And also SP failure indicate a service processor has failed or is failing. Common server indicator blink patterns and their meanings. A steady on means the device is powered on and operational. A steady off means the device is powered off or not detected. A slow blink, example 0.5 seconds on and off, means the device is experiencing normal activity. A fast blink means the device is experiencing high activity or ongoing data transfer. Single blink or standby means the device is powered and in standby mode. Slow unison blink means a removable component such as a hot swap drive has been inserted. Insertion blink means a removable component has been added and detected. Unison steady on, where all indicators are lit simultaneously, means diagnostic tests are being performed. Alternating blink in green and amber indicates an unsupported device or an oversubscribed component detected, resulting in a mismatch. Feedback flash indicates a moderate activity, such as drive access or is occurring. A data blink with momentary pause in a normal lit LED means data transfer is occurring. Diagnostic blink indicate diagnostics. Common on blade servers are causing a sequential lighting of LEDs. Now use visual indicators in conjunction with system logs or diagnostic software for accurate troubleshooting. Now that brings us to the end of our lesson on motherboards. The motherboard is the central platform for connections and all the components of a computer, allowing them to communicate and function together as a complete system. Understanding its structure, components, and layout is essential for anyone working in IT. These components are a key part of the CompTIA A+, and they form the foundation for installing, upgrading, and troubleshooting hardware. Take some time to review the components we covered and make sure you are comfortable identifying them and understanding their role within the system. In the next lesson, we continue building on this knowledge as we move deeper into motherboards and related components. If you found this video helpful, consider subscribing so you don't miss the rest of the lessons in our complete free A+ course. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video.